These aren't the stories your mother told you. No, these are the other stories.
This is a Patreon exclusive episode, and it's here just for you. A big thank you to all of you who are here to support us in our audio adventures. From the writing, editing, screaming, and hair-raising admin, we couldn't do this without you. So welcome, dear listener, to an exclusive episode of The Other Stories.
In the Red. Written by John C. Campbell and Luke Kondor. Narrated by Persephone Rose. Lifting the paper-thin hamburger to his mouth, Sol bit a chunk of the plastic-textured meat and chewed robotically. Silently, he stared across the service station foyer and swallowed. It was quieter than any service station he could remember visiting, eerily calm for a weekday afternoon, ghostly but for the distant groans of the motorway traffic. Markham Vale Services. He hadn't known of its existence until the fuel light on his dashboard pinged into life, and he saw the building peering over the horizon along with its signs for Burger King and KFC. His internal fuel gauge crying out for sustenance. It was odd, though. In almost 30 years of driving articulated lorries, he'd never run the fuel down so far. Always kept a quarter tank full for emergencies, and yet, for some inexplicable reason, today, they were running on fumes. The service station looked like any of the other 12 stops along the M1, offered the same fast food restaurants, the same plastic purple decor, gift shop, toilets and showers last checked by some poor sap called Greg at 12:01, plain plastic walls, and glaring fluorescent lights. "How's your veggie burger?" Sol mumbled. "I would have eaten just about anything, I reckon," Adnan said, dabbing the corner of his mouth with a serviette. "I'm famished." Sol nodded. "Weird as fuck, that last 5 miles, eh?" The two men returned to their silence and watched as a stringy pale fellow wiped down the table next to theirs. "Would you like some ketchup, Sol?" said Adnan. "Maybe that will help make it taste, of something." Sol grunted as he shoved a handful of cardboard fries into his mouth at once. "Give me a napkin too, will ya?" 10 more minutes and a quick toilet break later, they were walking back to their vehicle. A Scania S sleeper cab, top of the range, heavy load in tow, pair of foam dice tied to the rearview mirror, naturally, and hundreds of dead flies splattered against the grille and headlights, like cat's eyes, surveying their approach. "We'll be okay," Sol whispered to himself, a shiver rolling over his spine. The job was easy enough. Drive a hell of a long way in more or less a straight line, annoy some drivers along the route, provide your incredible maneuverability skills with some tight corners, take the money, rinse, and repeat. "It's odd, don't you think?" said Adnan, breaking the quiet once the truck was fueled up and back on the M1. This was only his 5th job on the road. He was shadowing Sol to learn the routes and routines he would eventually adopt alone. Adnan, a young man of 22, had always dreamed of a career in travel, and somehow ended up with a job at What the Truck, a hauling firm based in London and trading across Britain. He was an excitable little scamp, polite as anything, full of beans and eager to learn, a question for everything. Contrarily, Sol enjoyed silence. "What's odd?" grunted Sol. Adnan was peering into his phone. "Well, it doesn't mention Markham Vale Services at all on here. There's only 12 service stations on the list, and on this stretch, there's Tibshelf and Woodall, but nothing in between." Sol's pulse ratcheted up a notch. "Well," Sol said, clearing his throat, "maybe it's to do with the ledger." He felt his colleague's eyes on him, kept his own fixed on the road. "The ledger?" "Well, it being the 13th station, maybe? It wouldn't balance the ledger if there was 13 stations on the road, would it?" Sol spoke low, his lips barely moved, as if even discussing it would drop him down a few points. Leave it at that, lad, Sol thought, already bracing himself. What ledger? Is it in the glove compartment? Look, said Sol, I was gonna break you into all this gradual-like, but seeing as we're on the topic, I might as well tell you. Sol scratched at the stubble growing on his chin. It's not a real ledger. Not a real ledger? Real enough, though. Like Santa? Worse. You see, the ledger keeps a check on the balance of luck. It's essential for us in this profession, you know. Luck? I haven't lasted this long without keeping myself out of the red. Adnan turned off his phone, slid it into his coat pocket. What do you mean? Look, mate. We live in this kind of liminal world. Truck stops, service stations, endless motorways, even this cab. They're all a sort of man-made false environment. There's nothing real about them. They all look alike. Some cruel Groundhog Day of tarmac floors and plastic walls. Adnan nodded, leaning closer with every word. Well, Sol continued, away from the real world, full of the dynamic environments that encourage chance and opportunity, as they say, the balance of luck comes all unstuck. It's up to us to make sure that balance is maintained. Adnan nodded, his face suddenly cracked with a smile. They warned me about this. They said, be careful, Adnan. The trucking job isn't for the easily offended or the gullible. There's always ribbing. There's always a newbie hazing. Sol spun on his colleague with terrifying ferocity. This is no joke, Adam. Adnan. People get hurt when the balance isn't addressed. People die. Adnan sunk into his seat. Sol sighed, flipped down the sun visor to reveal a small horseshoe in the pouch underneath. He then pointed to an ornament hanging from the rearview mirror. Adnan had seen it before, but just assumed it to be some novelty air freshener. On closer inspection, he noticed that the furry object hanging from a silver chain had claws. A rabbit's foot. We don't take chances out here, kid. Back when horses and carts ruled the roads, they carried all kinds of charms. Most people assumed it was to ward off highwaymen, but truth is they understood the balance. Then steam wagons came along in the 18th century, followed by the combustion engine lorries in the 19th century, and by the time the 20th century wars hit, roads improved, transport improved, people got lazy, the balance of luck was all but forgotten. Sol was deep in a trance now, perfectly focused on the road whilst confidently narrating the history of his predecessors. Shit got real as truckers came to grisly ends left, right, and center. The road is not a safe place. Some call it the only certain path to hell. Then the British Minister of Transport called a meeting of all of them road folk in the know, like me, to discuss the misfortunes of our drivers. It came down to this. The balance was all off, bad luck was being left to fester, and bad things were happening to anyone in the trade who didn't try to fix it. So they came up with a plan, a ledger, each of us, and we gotta keep it balanced, otherwise... Can I have a look at it then? What? Can I see the ledger? It's a metaphorical ledger. It's real, but not really real. Are you even listening? Sol! A red Porsche 718 Boxster T blazed past them from the motorway entry ramp and almost plowed right into the cab. Sol gasped and swerved into the middle lane just in time, narrowly avoiding a Vauxhall Nova on the driver's side. The Porsche spun off into the hard shoulder without making contact and came to a halt in a cloud of dust and burnt rubber. It was a close call. The closest Sol had ever had to a crash. He was an experienced driver and had developed an almost sixth sense when it came to surrounding traffic. His heart pounded against the inside of his ribcage as cold beads of sweat ran down the hollow of his neck. "What the actual fuck?" he cried at last. "Where the bloody shirt flipper did that come from?" Adnan was gripping the passenger chicken handle with both hands, mouth hanging ghoulishly open. I didn't see it coming, Something's not right, said Sol, searching inward for some hidden answer. The balance must be off somehow. Shit, what was it? What did we do? But it's nonsense, isn't it? Said Adnan, sucking in deep breaths. You can't seriously believe that this has anything to do with some ledger. It's hocus-pocus rubbish. Hocus-pocus. You listen to me, kid. There was this bloke, James Newman. Man didn't think twice about swimming after eating. Didn't say morning major if he saw a lone magpie. Never once said bless you when somebody sneezed. But the worst thing he ever did, swear down, the worst thing he didn't hold his breath when going through a tunnel. Adnan whimpered. I didn't even realize that was a thing. A thing it is, my naive young buddy. Worst thing about it, James's wife was pregnant, and this was the last-minute run across the channel. He had to. He needed the money. But poor James, who didn't hold his breath, well, he was almost home when he went over the side of the Dartmouth Bridge. I was working at the office. I got the call. It came down to me to call his wife. She didn't answer. She was in the hospital. Turned out little James Jr. came early. Never met his daddy. All because of the balance. All because James was too stubborn to hold his bloody breath. Adnan suddenly turned 3 shades paler. He looked out of the window at the chaotic traffic around them. There were a million ways to die on the road, and he was only just realizing it now. Did I tell you that my wife is also pregnant? He said, voice crumbling. You did at that. So just tell me now. Did you do anything in that service station? Walk under a ladder? Did a black cat cross your path? Shit, you didn't fucking break a mirror, did you? Adnan swallowed. You fucking did do something, didn't you? What was it? Well, it's ridiculous, I suppose. When I went to get the condiments... Yes? It was those stupid paper sachets. You can never open them properly. They're a real pain. What did you do? Well, said Adnan sheepishly, I may have spilled some salt. You did what? But this is so stupid. That has nothing to do with luck. Both of them winced as a stone pecked the windscreen. A small white circle grew into a web of fractures about the size of a grapefruit. Their eyes met. Sol's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, the leather strained, readying to tear. We've got to do something. Have you got any of that salt with you? You have to throw it over your left shoulder. It'll get the devil off your back. Of course I don't have any of the salt, screamed Adnan, now caught in the frenzy of the situation. Why the hell would I have taken any of the damn salt? Can't we just get off the road? No. The devil cares not where he takes your soul, kid, replied Sol like some modern-day prophet. We gotta throw some salt over your left shoulder. Check down by the de-icer. Adnan reached down, lifted out a porcelain salt shaker in the shape of a nun. Why do you have this? It's a backup. Why do you need a backup? For this. For stupid people like you prick. It's not the same salt, but it'll have to do. Now wind down the window. Throw it over your shoulder. Sol, this is crazy. Do it. It's the only way. No! Yes. I don't believe in... Another pebble hit the windscreen. Another webbing of fractures appeared like magic, right in front of Adnan's ever-widening eyes. Do it. He reached down, unwound the window, gave one final look at Sol before launching it over his shoulder. The wind greedily snatched it away. Adnan started to wind the window back up, but stopped when he heard the bleeding horn. They looked to their mirrors. Behind them, a motorcyclist veered left, right, grabbed maniacally. Both of them saw the little pink face of the porcelain nun sticking out of the helmet visor. The blind biker careened silently into the side of an unsuspecting Ford Transit van. Within a second, the bike disappeared under its front, and the driver was flung into the air, landing in the center aisle, skidding to a stop where he lay still as the grave. The transit van veered the other way, slammed into the metal fencing on the hard shoulder. Its front end concertina to something inside, a human head, popped against the windscreen. A second later, the second wave of traffic caught up, still doing over 70 miles per hour. A yellow Punto was first, crashing into the back of the van. 2 bodies inside exploded like squashed tomatoes, covering the inside of the windscreen in reddish pulp. A third wave arrived, another Arctic lorry attempting to brake, doing so too hard, causing the back end to swing around, whipping its tail of flammable contents into the pileup. A fourth wave, too far back to see now. They were going too fast. The flammable contents lived up to its name. The sky thundered and the light darkened as a hand of fire reached upwards. The honking of horns suddenly silenced. Sol and Adnan watched in horror, still driving away from the mess. Sol wanted to speak, couldn't find any words to say. Adnan's hands were up over his mouth, potentially holding back vomit, or a scream, or even blood if the boy had bitten his tongue. Sol wouldn't have blamed him. He wasn't sure what initiating mass death did for the ledger, but he figured he'd need to get a new backup salt shaker as soon as possible. Now the moaning started, the disbelieving, life-altering moan of a newly recruited madman. Poor lad won't forget this anytime soon, he thought. Adnan began to rock back and forth, screaming coarsely into his hands. Sol leaned down to the radio, turned up the volume, almost smiled to hear the familiar jangling guitars of Don't Fear the Reaper. As the chaos disappeared in their rearview mirror, he tapped his hand to the beat, hummed louder, louder, didn't stop until he couldn't hear Adnan's screams anymore. Look, Sol said, pointing towards the horizon. I think I see a rainbow. Yes, a rainbow. It's good luck, lad. That should see us out of the red. Adnan quieted down, long enough to see that there was nothing on the horizon. Nothing but more road.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and once again want to thank you for your support. Tonight, at our cloaked gathering, we shall toast you and your prosperous future. We shall chant your name until our dark lord, Podcastius, awakes from the great static, before dancing the ancient other-storied waltz until the spirits leave our bodies and we find ourselves awoken in the middle of the woods, blood around our moors, confused, naked, and late for work. Until next time.